Hello everyone, this is Professor Robert Solis. Welcome to this video lesson. I'm going to create another lesson based on lists using a list box. So I don't want you to confuse the difference between a list and a list box. This is a list box which is giving a listing of items. And a list is simply a type, an extension of an array. It's an array on steroids. But the cool thing about lists is they can shrink and they can grow, whereas an array is fixed. Once you establish it, that's it. Lists are cool in that you can add members, remove members, you can sort them, and that's what we're going to talk about in this particular case, how to sort. So what I've done is I've created a very simple graphical user interface. Well, first of all, go ahead and create a CSharp program called CSharp Lists Introduction 2. And once you've created that CSharp program, then you're going to create a graphical user interface that contains a group box. So the first thing that you'll do is you'll go over here to the toolbox and you'll grab, let me do this here. I'm going to put this right next to here so I can have a single screen at first. You'll go over here to containers and you'll drag and drop a group box over here. And then once you've dragged and dropped the group box, you will drag and drop 3 radio buttons. And so that's over here. Let's see, where are they? Down a little bit further. Radio button, there we go. So you'll drag and drop 3 of these radio buttons into the group box. And then for the group box, we're going to change the text property to selection. Because the idea is that I want the user to make a selection. Are you going to add a player, remove a player, or sort the list? Perhaps I should run it so that I can show you what it is that you're going to be creating. So add a player is set up by default. So let me add Robert, submit. Let me add Kristen, submit. Let me add Joshua, submit. Jackson, submit. I'll add Sally, submit. Jennifer, submit. Now, if I select remove a player, it's going to change the context of what this does. If I select sort the list, again, it's going to change the context of what this bottom group box does. Sorting the list does exactly that. It just resorts it. Removing a player, I can just simply type a name in here. For example, let's say that I want to get rid of Jennifer. So I get rid of Jennifer and submit. Notice that Jennifer has been removed and everything moves up 1. I can add a player and it's always going to add it. Submit to the bottom. And then of course if I sort the list, it's just simply going to resort that list. Okay, so that's what you are creating. And so in order to facilitate that, the first thing we're going to do is to add a group box with 3 radio buttons. The radio button text properties, as you can see here, are add a player, remove a player, and sort the list. Then you're going to create another group box. Now this group box, I am going to give it a name. And the reason why I'm giving it GRP result is because my intention is to change the context of this group box based on the radio button that was selected by the user. So first let's have this radio button be the default radio button. And so that means that if I scroll down over here, let's see here, I think it's checked. Yeah, here it is, checked. You're going to change the checked property for this radio button to true. These radio buttons are not going to be checked. As you see, they are set to false. When I run the program, only 1 radio button can be selected at any given time. And so that's the cool thing about setting them up in a group box. Only run 1 radio button is going to be active at any given time. Okay, and then you have in this next group box. Now this group box, it already has a name, but I'm not going to give it a Hungarian notation name. It's called group box 2, whatever it's called. I don't care. But for this group box, I do care. So for this guy, you are going to create it GRP. You're going to give it the name GRP result. And then you're going to give the text property player information. We're going to drag and drop a text box. So you'll take this text box, you'll drag and drop it into the group box, and then you're going to give it a name, txt player info. And then you're going to drag and drop a button from the toolbox. So where is that button? Drag it into here. You're going to give it a name btn submit, and you're going to give it the text property submit. By the way, I don't think I gave you the names for the radio buttons. So over here, RDB, which is the Hungarian notation for radio button, add a player. RDB remove a player. And then finally, RDB sort the list. Again, making sure that this radio button has the checked property set to true. Okay, over here, this is going to be a list box. So this guy over here, you'll just simply drag and drop it over here. The name of this list box is LST players. And this is going to be a list of all the players. Now, for the form, you're going to give it a text property of players list. And notice that there are no minimize or maximize buttons. So the maximize box and the minimize box, you're setting both of those to false. Okay. So if you want to pause the video to create the graphical user interface, go ahead and do so. And then to give you the names again, over here I have LST players, RDB add a player, RDB remove a player, RDB sort the list. This group box is going to have a name. We're going to call it GRP result. The text box is going to be called txt player info. And then we have btn submit. Finally, you're going to make sure that this radio button has the checked property set to true. When you're done, save your work. And then now that you've finished the graphical user interface and naming all of the various items, you're ready to design the code. So we're going to double click on the submit button so we can go into the code area. Now the first thing that I'm going to have you do is to create a global object. It's going to be of type list, and it's going to be a container called, or it's going to be named players. And the idea is to create a list of players for our team. And so that means that I'm going to contain it's going to contain their names, so I'm going to give it the string type inside of the angled brackets. Okay, so list, angled brackets string, players is the name of our list. We are going to assign that new list angled brackets string, open and close parentheses, semicolon. Okay, and so that's going to be in a global area so that everyone can access it, because I intend on creating a function, and so let me go ahead and give that to you. So go ahead and create a function called update list of names, and the idea is to clear this list and then to repopulate it with the names inside of our list. I should say clear this list box, because that's what this is. This is a list box, which is different from this players list. As you can see here when I hover on top of it, this is a players list. So the first thing that we're going to have to do to this list box is to clear its contents. And so lst players.items.clear open close parens is going to clear the box. Then I'm going to use this for each statement that says for each of the different players in my players list. So let me split the screen so I can show you what I'm talking about. So here's the function that we're working on, but over here if I go back to what I declared over here, this players list. Okay, so players is going to have a bunch of players inside of it, like Robert, Kristen, Joshua, Jackson, Sally, Billy, blah, 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 blah. It's going to have a bunch of players in it. Now, anytime that the user is going to add, remove, or sort, then we want to clear this out and redisplay what the new information is. And so the way that we're going to do that is via this update list of names function. So the first thing it does is it clears out the list box. So this now is blank. Then within for each, we're going to create a value variable. And variable just simply means I can be a string, I can be an integer, I can be a float, I can be a double, I can be anything. Well, I am going to become whatever you are, players. Well, what are you? I hold a bunch of strings. I'm a list that holds a bunch of strings. Oh, okay, in this case, value is going to be of type variable string. So for all the strings in the players list, I'm going to go through every single one of you for each of you. And what am I going to do? I'm going to add each one of you, starting with the first and then the second and the third, to my list players list box, to this guy right here. So now let me go ahead and take this, split the screen so I can graphically demonstrate what's happening here. Okay, so let's say, for example, that I had Robert, Kristen, Joshua, Jackson. All right, so the first value would be Robert. Add Robert to the list box. Okay, Robert is displayed over here. Okay, we haven't gone through each of these. The next one is Kristen. Okay, so we'll add Kristen to the list, and then we'll add Joshua, and then we'll add Jackson. Finally, we've gone through each one of these, so then we jump out of this for each statement because we have exhausted all of the items in players. Okay, so that's how this function works. It's simply going to be updating this list box based on this list of players. Okay, so now that I have that, I'm going to go ahead and double click on the button, and of course that's going to take me into the code area for BTN submit. And so what I want to do is this. Well, first of all, which one of these is checked? Is add a player checked? Remove a player? Sort the list? I better determine. If sort the list is checked, right? So if dot checked is true, then what I'm going to do is to call this function called sort based on this players list. So in essence, what this does is if I have Robert, Kristen, in fact, let me go ahead and just do a sample run here. I'll put it on top of here like this. And so let me go ahead and add Robert, and I'll add Kristen, Joshua, Jackson. Obviously, this is not sorted. So when I select this, and I'm going to select, or I'm going to click on this button, what is it going to do? It's going to say, yeah, the players list that has, I know that the list box is displaying Robert, Kristen, Joshua, Jackson, but the actual list item here, this list container called players, has these names, and that's what I'm going to sort. And then once I sort it, then I'm going to call update list of names, which, as you just saw, is going to update this based on whatever this contains. So I'll tell you what I'll do. Let me stop the code right here. Oops, right here. I'm going to break it right here so we can see what's going on. All right, so let me go back to the execution. Here it is. I'm going to sort the list. I'll click submit. Okay, we've just stopped the program right here. Now, what does players contain? Okay, so let me see if I can click on that little triangle right here. It's disappearing so quickly. Here it is. Okay, so Robert, Kristen, Joshua, Jackson. Robert is at index 0, Kristen is at index 1, so forth and so on. This is not sorted. I am about to step over so that it activates the .sort function that belongs to any list that I create, and it's going to sort the items. So watch this. I click this guy. Now if I hover on top of here, click on that triangle, wow, look at that. Jackson, Joshua, Kristen, Robert. It sorted it for me. Now, for you guys just starting off programming, this is significant because what this does is it chooses an appropriate sorting algorithm, in this case a bunch of strings, and then activates it. It doesn't initialize it, it initiates it. It executes this sorting algorithm, and also all kinds of sorting algorithms. Bubble sort, selection sort, quick sort, merge sort. I mean, there's a ton of sorting algorithms. You don't have to worry about them. All you have to do is just say, hey, sort this guy for me. All right, so once this is sorted, then let's see what happens. So it looks like we go over here and say, okay, well, if this guy was checked, if add a player was checked, nope, that wasn't checked. So, okay, how about remove a player? Nope, that wasn't checked either. All right, well, first of all, if there are any items or if the text box is blank, we'll talk about that in just a moment. I shouldn't say if, it just simply blanks out this text box. And then this is what I wanted to show you. Now we go to update list of names, which means we are going to update this list box. How are we going to do that? Well, let me step into, and this is the code that we had talked about. So we're going to clear whatever is over here, and then for each of the different values that we have inside of our list, so that's what this is going to be based on our players, right, which we have Jackson, Joshua, Kristen, Robert. We're going to display that here. So what we do is we simply say, okay, so right now the value is Jackson. That's our first item. Let's add Jackson to the list. And then let's add Joshua and Kristen and Robert, right? So it's adding all these items. So let me click continue, and here it is, redisplay. Okay, so that is the first thing that we need to check. If the sort the list option has been selected, then let's go ahead and sort the list and then display the updated list of names function, which is going to display this stuff on the list. Okay, now what if this is not selected? Okay, well the next thing that I need to determine is then if there's information that's actually displayed on this text box. Check this out. If this radio button here is not checked, then one of these must be checked. And if one of these must be checked, then what we are saying is that you had better have text here, because how can you add a player if this is empty? How can you remove a player if this is empty? So what this statement over here is saying is, well, first of all, is this thing blank? Because if it is, then we better handle this in a special way. The user is supposed to have information here. Well, what are we going to do? Well, let's see what happens here. Okay, notice that this is blank, and I want to add a player. Let's see what happens when I click submit. Invalid input, enter a player name. So it displays a message box. And all I have to do is click OK, and then I can go from there. How about remove a player? I didn't type a player name, submit. It displays a message box, letting me know, oh, I've got to enter a player name. All right, so I'm going to click OK. Okay, so as you can see from our else if statement, if the user does not enter anything into the text box, this is what's going to be called, which is going to be generating a message box. And so as you can see over here, the message box has a message, and there's the message. It has a caption. There it is. It's going to display a certain number of buttons, maybe OK, maybe the OK and cancel, maybe yes and no, whatever the button is that you want to select. That's this part over here. And then we're going to display an icon, which is this part right here. Okay, so let me retype this part here so you can see what I did originally. So you're going to type in message box, this guy right here, .show, and you have all kinds of flavors that are available for how you display a message box. I like flavor number 7 because it allows me to type in a string. It allows me to type in a caption, which is the title, what kind of button I'm going to select, and then what kind of icon that I'm going to display. So for example, here, if I say enter a player name, close quote, comma, and now I'm going to display a caption, and as you can see from above, I display invalid input, comma, and now I can display a message box. So let me hit space bar. Oh wow, look at that. Message box icon. Yep, that's what I want. Message box, I should say, buttons. So let me double click this, dot, and look at that. It gives me a list of all kinds of different options. I just want the OK button, but I could display the abort, retry, ignore, OK, cancel, retry, cancel, so forth and so on. Perhaps, I know that when I've done something wrong on Amazon.com, it displays abort, retry, ignore if some weird code happens to execute. So I've seen this before. Perhaps you've seen this as well. In this case, we just want the OK button. All right, and then comma. So now we're going to display a message box icon. So let me hit the space bar. Oh, nice. it gives me the list, and yeah, the message box icon is what I want, dot, and here are all of the items that I can choose from. And in this case I chose error, but you don't have to. You can choose any one of these. And then of course terminate this thing with a semicolon. So that's how you're going to set up the message box, is to just simply type in messagebox.show, go to flavor number 7, and then just go from there. I call it flavor. I'm just being casual here. Perhaps option is the better professional word to use. Okay, then I don't want to execute the rest of this code because the user did something wrong. Namely, they did not enter text in the text box. So by me typing return, the interpretation of this is skip over everything else and exit out of this btn submit click routine. So whenever you type return like this in this particular context, that means go from here all the way to here. Don't execute any of this code. Just simply jump out of the routine and you're ready to wait for the user to do something else. And that's exactly what I want to do. You didn't enter any information here, so I got to display a message for you, and then I'm not going to continue with this routine because continuing with this routine is assuming that you entered a name here. All right, now let's say that the user clicks add a player. Okay, if RDB sort the list is checked, nope, it's add a player. Okay, so this is false. Else if this is blank, let's pretend that Robert is typed over here. So then it would just simply go to the next if statement, which is saying, okay, is RDB add a player checked? Yes, it is. Well, if that's the case, then the players list that you created up here, right? The players list that you created, go ahead and add a player. Now, the name of the player that you're going to add, like if I wanted to type in Robert, I could just do this, right? Add Robert to my list. But that's hard coding, and that's not necessary. Just get the text that's inside of this text box. Get the text in that text box, and then add that to the players, because what is this list of players? It's a list of strings. Same thing if the user clicks remove and then types in a name and then clicks submit. What you're doing is you're saying, hey, is the add radio button checked? No, it's not. How about the remove a player check radio button? Is that selected? Yes, it is in our scenario. Okay, so then get the name or get the text from this text box and remove that from our players list. So you can see here how we are either adding or removing a player based on the radio button that was selected, and of course we've already checked to make sure that this is not blank. That means that this code gets executed because there's actually content inside of this text box. Well, after we've done that, now we can go ahead and clear the text box to get ready for the next input. And then we're going to call update list of names, which will update the list box. So specifically for this guy right here, here's what's happening. Let me run the program here, and I'll just move this and superimpose it on top of this list box here. Or I'm sorry, on top of this graphical user interface here. So let's say that I add Robert, submit. I'm going to add Kristen. I'm going to add Joshua. And I'm also going to add Jackson. Okay, now I'm going to, well actually that's the process that I wanted to show you. If I add Sally, okay, watch what happens. As soon as I click submit, Sally goes over here and it's removed from here. See that, how it's removed? Because of this line of code right here. Whatever code is inside of, whatever text is inside of here, get rid of it. And the same thing happens for remove a player. For example, let's get rid of Joshua. So, see how the text is removed? That's because of this guy right here. All right, close the program. And I think that's it. Oh, no, that's not it. There's something else that needs to take place. Let's see here. I'll run the program. And let's say that I click sort the list. Oh, did you see the change here? This is disabled. It says sort the list. And I have a submit button. Let me click this guy. Player information. This is enabled, and I have a submit button. Let me go back to sort the list. Let me go to remove a player. This is player information, text box, and the submit button. So in other words, it seems like as soon as I click one of these radio buttons, something gets affected with this bottom group box. All right, so what I did was this. Watch what happens when I double click this radio button. So I double click the radio button and it takes me into RDB add a player checked changed. In other words, something changed here when I selected this. Here's the procedure that's going to run as a result of me clicking this. Or if I double click this one, it takes me into this code area, RDB remove a player underscore check change. Finally, if I double click this, it's going to take me into this code area, RDB sort the list underscore check change. So in other words, if you want to execute code based on the user selecting one of these, well, in this design view, you're going to have to double click this, double click this, double click this to take you to the code area. Well, what do I want to happen? What do I want to happen when the user clicks add a player? Well, first of all, this group box over here, I want to make sure that it says player information. And so now you know why I gave this group box a name, namely GRP result. I want to change this text property so that it displays player information. Now, if the user has this button or has selected this button, then I want to change this from player information to sort the list. If the user selects remove a player, then I want it to display player information. So see, I gave this group box a name specifically so that I can change this text. And so you can see the text properties that I'm changing based on the radio button selection. Now if the user selects this guy, it's going to change the group box text to player information, and it's also going to make sure that the text box is enabled. See, the text box needs to be enabled if I want to add a player or if I want to remove a player. But if I'm going to sort the list, then I don't want the user to type in anything into here because that's irrelevant. I just want to sort the list and click the button. And so that's why you'll notice over here when the user clicks the RDB sort list radio button, the text is going to change to sort the list. That's what this will do. And this text box is going to be disabled. All right, so let's run the program. And I'm going to move it over here so that we can see the code over here and see what happens. Okay, so when I click sort the list, did you see how this guy became disabled and how the text changed? That's because we told it to do that here. Change the text to sort the list, there it is. Disable the text box, there it is. Now I'm going to click the add a player. Look at this. It's changed the text to player information, here it is, and the text box is enabled. Let me go back to sort the list. Okay, so it's displaying sort the list. And then I'm going to go to remove a player. Look at this. When this is clicked or when it's checked, change the group box text to player information. Yep, that's what happened. And enable the text box. And sure enough, the text box is enabled. All right, so that's the purpose of these 3 chunks of code, is to make sure that based on the user selection, something is going to happen within this group box. And that is it. So this is Professor Robert Solis. I hope this video lesson was helpful. Have a good day. See you next time.